Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government. Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center?
When we're talking about what's going on here, we got to understand the background. We have all these people talking about, whoa, what about Donald Trump's business interests here and his involvement with Trump hotels and everything? Let's take a look at Google's interests. Let's take a look at Jeff Bezos' interests. Because I talked about it yesterday when we were talking, still looking at the removal, the political assassination of Michael Flynn. Who was at the center of that? Who got that information?
They run the whole show.
Post. And the Washington Post was bought by Jeff Bezos for $250 million, but he got $600 million contract from the CIA to run their
People ask, why am I pissed? They hold out a sign, whether I'm black, white, Christian, Muslim, whatever I am, I can come, I can put ads up for my products, I follow their rules, and then they say, secretly you're banned because you're not human, you don't exist. The discrimination of this and stealing $5 million clearly is what it would be. Last year, 3.3 of an ad thing we had that was working, that we invested in, that we spent time in to sell our products, to fund our message of freedom, and they blow us away like we don't exist. Man, I don't care. If somebody breaks in my car and steals my stereo, it's not that it's a $200 stereo. It's my windows knocked out. They violated me. I'm pissed. I am 50 times more pissed about this because they're trying to steal my birthright.
Alex, when they say that you can't do this because we're a political organization, because we make comments.
Yeah, we're not allowed, because, well, see, it's FTC, it's FCC, or it's Federal Election Commission. They're applying Democrat claims like they said with Drudge 2 years ago. They want to shut Drudge down, Congress said, because he's political and he has advertising. Yeah. Well, of course, I have a view as a private citizen on guns. You hit the keys. I forgot the keys in the article. See, there's so much. They're saying we're political, so we don't have speech, and we're not allowed to make money outside of any law. They're just exercising like TPP, which was in there, global corporate governance, and even though TPP didn't pass, they're still implementing it and carrying it out.
When you put an ad up for Caveman and they serve that ad on somebody, that's not political. But they're going back and they're investing.
They say your site's political, yeah, so you can't get funding. Well, so everything's political. Yeah. Of course I want lower taxes. It's not political. It's called survival. Just like Google lobbies to have a 0% tax corporately in America, ass. And all I want is 35%, jerk, and I can't live because a bunch of assholes like Schmidt believe I don't have a right to exist. Screw you. Screw you thinking you own me, you son of a bitch. And I'm going to get the emails with their names and everything else posted in here from ad rolls so you can see what they said to us, so you can see it for yourself. Because I'm not going to have the Snopes, assholes, and all the other pieces of fuck sit there and say none of this exists. You want war, you damn cowardly pieces of chicken neck filth. I'm going to sue your ass into hell. Get ready.
Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government. Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center? Does anybody else see a problem here? If the government has nothing to hide, why are they so afraid to answer a few questions? This story does not add up. Don't listen to me. Listen to your head. Don't listen. Don't listen to anything they say.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The title of this report is A Satirist's Dream, Closing the Gap Between Anti-Corruption Law and Reality. I could fill my 60 seconds talking about the 18 years' worth of unaudited accounts, or the bazillions that are squandered on agriculture and foreign aid boondoggles, or the Tillack case where instead of any of the alleged fraudsters being arrested, it was the journalist trying to find out about them who found himself banged up by the police. I could talk about the £6.6 million spent last year by European commissioners simply on entertainment and luxury gifts and hotels. I could talk about the wonderful spectacle of President Van Rompuy and Commissioner Ashton flying to the same meeting in Russia in separate private jets, leaving Brussels within 4 hours of each other. Instead, I'll confine myself to saying this. These things happen not because the EU attracts particularly bad people. I mean, of course, it attracts some bad people. Man is fallen, and like all institutions, it contains those who give in to temptation. It happens rather because there is no link between taxation, representation and expenditure at Brussels level. It was Milton Friedman who said there's two kinds of money in the world. There's your money and there's my money. The trouble is that in the EU, it's all your money. Hence negligence, corruption, fraud, and what we see before us today.
Mr. Co-President Nigel Farage, Freedom and Democracy.
Well, good morning, Mr. Van Rompuy. You've been in office for 1 year, and in that time, the whole edifice is beginning to crumble. There's chaos. The money's running out. I should thank you. You should perhaps be the pin-up boy of the Eurosceptic movement. But just look around this chamber this morning. Just look at these faces. Look at the fear. Look at the anger. Poor old Barroso here looks like he's seen a ghost. You know, they're beginning to understand that the game is up, and yet in their desperation to preserve their dream, they want to remove any remaining traces of democracy from the system. And it's pretty clear that none of you have learned anything. You know, when you yourself, Mr. Van Rompuy, say that the euro has brought us stability, I suppose I could applaud you for having a sense of humour, but isn't this really just the bunker mentality? You know, your fanaticism is out in the open. You talked about the fact that it was a lie to believe that the nation state could exist in a 21st century globalised world. Well, that may be true in the case of Belgium, who haven't had a government for 6 months, but for the rest of us, right across every member state in this union, and perhaps this is why we see the fear in the faces, increasingly people are saying, we don't want that flag, we don't want the anthem, we don't want this political class, we want the whole thing consigned to the dustbin of history. And we had the Greek tragedy earlier on this year, and now we have the situation in Ireland. Now, I know that the stupidity and greed of Irish politicians has a lot to do with this. They should never ever have joined the euro. They suffered with low interest rates, a false boom and a massive bust. But look at your response to them. What they're being told, as their government's collapsing, is that it would be inappropriate for them to have a general election. In fact, Commissioner Wren here said they had to agree their budget first before they'd be allowed to have a general election. Just who the hell do you think you people are? You are very, very dangerous people indeed. Your obsession with creating this euro state means that you're happy to destroy democracy. You appear to be happy for millions and millions of people to be unemployed and to be poor. Untold millions must suffer so that your euro dream can continue. Well, it won't work, because it's Portugal next. With their debt levels of 325% of GDP, they're the next ones on the list, and after that, I suspect it'll be Spain. And the bailout for Spain would be 7 times the size of Ireland, and at that moment, all of the bailout money has gone. There won't be any more. But it's even more serious than economics, because if you rob people of their identity, if you rob them of their democracy, then all they are left with is nationalism and violence. I can only hope and pray that the euro project is destroyed by the markets before that really happens.
Thank you.
They cannot create the world of Orwell. They have to manipulate us to create it. And what they're doing all the time, and a lot of this stuff in the movies, which are feeding you what they want to happen, look at all the movies over the last decade or so, more and more now all the time, that are portraying this very police state and this very Orwellian fascist Agenda 21 world that I've been talking about. They're doing that for a reason. It's to implant that in the subconscious so it becomes reality through humans' creative imagination. They have to get us to do it. Number one, the fascist global state is not coming because we're not fricking having it anymore. And we are not any longer going to be manipulated into manifesting our own enslavement. And when they tell us to be quiet, we shout bloody louder. Silence is consent. Can you hear us now? If you want to be free, then don't run and hide. This is a time for looking the world in the bloody eye. Together. Coming together. Strength does not come from physical capacity, it comes from indomitable will, Mahatma Gandhi. And that will says we are not having it anymore. Human race, get off your knees. What are you doing down there? Hey!
The whole enterprise is crazy, and it's an absolute scam which is going to cost you a great deal.
It's rather like paying monkeys, because what happens is the civil servants draw up the list, and if it's vote number 58 and the piece of paper says vote yes, you vote yes, and if it's number 59 and it says vote no, you vote no. It is an absolute farce. It is a complete sham masquerading as democracy.
What you're about to hear will both surprise and outrage you. It's the true story of Europe. It's the story the politicians don't want you to hear, because it shows how they've deceived us and betrayed our nation. Only in 1994 did Chancellor Kohl's foreign policy spokesman, speaking on behalf of the ruling party of Europe's dominant nation, Germany, clearly reveal the true plan. The plan is to create a federal European superstate. Into it will be merged up to 25 ancient European nations, including our own. This new country, called Europe, will have one parliament, one government, one court of justice, one currency, one flag, and one anthem. That has been the plan all along. But those who favoured it knew the people of Europe would never accept it. They would never willingly surrender their freedoms to become just a province in a vast European superstate. So what did the politicians do? They conspired to keep the truth from the people.
He also discusses with Hitler a new plan to unite Europe, not just under the conquering hammer of Blitzkrieg, but through a lasting political and economic union, which the Nazis named Europäische Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft, or the European Economic Community. In 1942, a conference is held in Berlin to discuss this political and economic integration of Europe. Of all the nations targeted, Britain has proved the wild card because she alone has successfully resisted invasion.
Anger and violence have spilled over onto the streets of Athens, with police using tear gas and water cannon against Greeks protesting draconian new budget cuts. Trump demonstrators hurled petrol bombs, with more than 100 detained as the country's parliament passed an austerity package aimed at securing the latest bailout. RT's Peter Oliver reports from Athens.
What we have seen, though, is anger on the streets of Athens. We saw a crowd of around 100,000 people gather in the square just behind me in front of the Parliament building. That quite quickly escalated into violent clashes between police and protesters. In a matter of seconds, downtown Athens went into essentially an urban war zone for a couple of hours. We saw Molotov cocktails thrown, flashbang grenades used, also tear gas used extensively again here in Athens as police tried to calm down protesters who are extremely unhappy by what they see as unfair measures being taken by the government. Now, also there was 100 people detained by police, 5 arrests made, and we're also hearing of injuries on both sides, both the police and demonstrators. The Greek people undoubtedly very unhappy about what's been signed into law. What's essentially happened is that politicians here in Greece have voted in order to allow the next round of austerity measures. 153 MPs voting in favour of these latest austerity measures, 128 against, and there were 18 abstentions. What these new austerity measures mean, though, for the Greek people is that we're going to see the retirement age rise to 67. There's also going to be slashes to pensions and wages, and there's also going to be new laws that's going to actually make it easier for employers to fire their staff. Now, all of this comes as Antonis Samaras, the Prime Minister, had to make 13.5 billion euro worth of savings. The reason he had to do that was it was demanded of him by Greece's 3 main lenders, the so-called Troika. Now, they had said that unless these cuts were made, that Greece wouldn't get its next round of bailout money. That's over 30 billion euros, and without that money, well, Greece was out of the euro essentially, and they would have faced a potentially devastating default. So that's what these new austerity measures mean. They've been signed into law. This is the future for the Greek people now.
The new austerity package is said to be the worst so far in 3 years of the Greek debt crisis. Journalist Charlie McGrath says the cuts will heap further suffering on ordinary people and that the situation won't change for the better until Greece acknowledges it's bankrupt.
We already have people killing themselves in front of Parliament in Greece. You have people that are losing everything, losing hope. The last thing to go, I think, is going to be, their sense that they have anybody representing them whatsoever. You have this tyranny of the technocrat majority inside Greece. 153 out of 300 vote more austerity onto the people. I think as they continue to lose all hope that they have any control of their own financial destiny whatsoever, how can it do anything but digress into potentially civil war? The financial health of the country is not going to change for the better until they realize that they are in default. They're bankrupt, and they tell the banks that are holding their debt and the European Union and the ECB and the Troika that they are going to default. This is what happens in free market capitalism. Their prospect for a return to a healthy economy, it has to start with them realizing that they are completely and utterly broke and start over from scratch.